The chamber of the Galactic Council towered like a cathedral carved from cold stone and polished crystal. Starlight from the great dome above scattered across rows of alien delegates, their voices rising and falling in a symphony of indifference. At the center, a hollow projection flickered, the image of a vast lion-like figure bleeding, armor cracked, mane matted with soot. Kaeldar, warrior king of the Ardanthi, lay surrounded on the planet Kalar V, his defenses broken, his transmission reaching every delegate. Reinforcements! His voice thundered through static. For honor's sake, stand with me? Do not! The feed fractured, sound breaking under interference. Around the chamber, silence followed, broken only by the slow hiss of the Drogketh Strategos rising from his seat. His scaled form gleamed under the light, eyes slitted, mouth curling into a thin smile. The king is finished, Veiltor declared. To waste fleets on a corpse is madness. Survival requires sacrifice. His death is inevitable. Let us preserve what remains. Murmurs swept the chamber, most in agreement. Tall insected envoys clicked their mandibles in assent. The avian Chorai folded their wings and muttered prayers that carried no action. One voice cut across them. Cowardice dressed as strategy doesn't make it noble, said Captain Elias Grant. Heads turned. He stood alone at the human delegation's podium, broad-shouldered in his dark uniform, scar across his jaw catching the light. His words carried none of the ritual flourishes the council adored, only blunt truth. That king fought for all of you. Now you'd abandon him because the cost is high? If loyalty means nothing, what is the alliance worth? A hiss rose from Veiltor. Human sentimentality again. You speak of loyalty as though it feeds fleets, fuels weapons, or secures victory. Naive. The Ardanthi chose strength, they knew death was its price. Elias clenched his fists. His brother's face flashed in memory. His unit left stranded years ago, when these same voices voted retreat. The council called it necessity then too. You'll dress this in numbers and probabilities, Elias said, voice hard. But history won't remember your calculations. It will remember you ran. Laughter rippled among certain species. The Chorai delegate tilted his feathered head. And what will humanity do? Send one ship to save a dying lion? Noble failure is still failure. The vote was swift. One by one, representatives raised their tokens. Symbols blazed in the air, each affirming retreat. When the final tally displayed, the outcome was clear: abandon Kaeldar. Elias didn't move. His jaw tightened, but he stood straight until the chamber emptied, alien footsteps echoing like a retreating tide. The Resolute hung in orbit, a steel arrow among giants. Inside the command deck, the crew waited. They've decided? Asked Lieutenant Rivera, dark-eyed, his hands gripping the console. Elias stepped off the platform, every stride weighted with fury. They left him to die. A murmur spread. Marines shifted uncomfortably, medics exchanged uneasy glances. Rivera pressed. Then, we follow orders? We pull out? No. The word cut sharp. Elias stopped at the center of the deck. We break formation. We go down. Shock rippled through the room. That's suicide, Rivera said. The Drogketh have the surface locked. If the council... To hell with the council, Elias snapped. He drew a slow breath, steadying himself. You think they'll remember us for obedience? They'll forget us tomorrow. But if we save him, if we stand when all others run, they'll never forget. Silence followed. Then Sergeant Kane, veteran Marine, spoke from the corner. Better to die pulling a king from the fire than live branded cowards. Rivera's voice dropped. If this fails, they'll court-martial us all. Then they can. Elias looked each officer in the eye. But when I put my brother in the ground, I swore no man, no ally, would be abandoned if I could stand in the way. That king isn't human, but the promise doesn't change. The weight of his words settled over them. One by one nods spread. Marines straightened. Medics checked packs. Pilots exchanged glances and began powering engines. Rivera exhaled and managed a crooked smile. Then we're in. Engines roared. The Resolute detached from the retreating fleet. Alarms flared across comm channels as alien commanders broadcast demands. Human vessel, break off! This is unauthorized! Resolute, your actions are reckless. Return to formation! Some messages carried derision. Ah, the primitives run to their deaths. Sentiment will gut them faster than any blade. Elias listened, face unreadable. When Rivera glanced at him, he simply said, "Cut comms." The channel died to silence. Ahead, HFY loomed. Red storms churned across its surface, vast ruins of shattered orbital rings circling the planet like broken crowns. Lightning forked through dust clouds, casting long shadows across citadels reduced to rubble. On the deck, crew members buckled in. Elias gripped the rail. "Remember," he said, voice low but steady, "the Council doesn't believe we'll try. They think loyalty is weakness. Let's prove them wrong." The Resolute tilted, engines burning, and plunged toward the storm-shrouded world. For a heartbeat, Elias let himself imagine what waited below, a broken king, surrounded by enemies, believing he had been abandoned. He tightened his grip, the scar on his jaw aching with memory. Not this time. The ship shook as they cut through the first layers of atmosphere, fire streaking across the hull. Warning klaxons rang, dust storms tearing against the shields. The descent would be brutal, but Elias stood unmoving, gaze locked forward. When Rivera glanced at him again, searching for doubt, Elias gave only one answer. "We hold the line," he said. "No matter the cost." The Resolute tore through HFY's storm belts, the ship buffeted by roaring winds and shards of debris hurled from shattered orbital rings. Red lightning streaked across the clouds, searing the shields in bursts of blinding light. Inside the cabin, Marines gripped their restraints as the hull groaned. "Stabilizers are fighting me," Rivera reported, sweat on his brow. "Crosswinds are tearing us apart." "Hold steady," Elias said, voice flat, eyes fixed on the flickering tactical feed. The coordinates from Kael'dar's last transmission pulsed on the map, the ruins of a fortress city once called Kareth. That was their target. The ship broke through the storm layer. The landscape unfolded in a desolation of fire and ash, towers sheared to stumps, walls collapsed into heaps of broken stone, the ground littered with metallic husks of war machines long abandoned. The planet reeked of endings. "Contact!" Kane called from the gunner's station. Red blips swarmed across the radar. Drogketh's scavenger craft rose from the ruins, sleek and jagged like predators circling a wounded beast. "Cut them down!" Elias ordered. Turrets lit the sky, bursts of plasma streaking into the swarm. Enemy craft spiraled in flames, smashing into towers, but more closed in. The Resolute dropped hard, engines screaming as Rivera forced her into the canyon floor. "Landing zone ahead!" Rivera shouted. The ship's ramp slammed down before the dust settled. Marines charged into the storm, boots pounding against cracked stone, visors glowing in the haze. Elias led at the front, rifle raised, his presence steady as a lighthouse in chaos. Enemy fire rained from broken walls. Drogketh hunters slithered from shadows, scaled bodies armored in bone plates, weapons spitting green bolts. "Push forward!" Elias barked. Gunfire thundered through the ruins. Marines advanced with brutal precision, grenades tearing through barricades, medics pulling the wounded back without hesitation. The Drogketh fought with savage hunger, but the humans pressed on, each step carrying them closer to the fortress where Kael'dar's signal pulsed faintly. By the time the courtyard fell silent, bodies lay strewn in pools of ash and dust. Smoke curled from shattered archways. Elias lifted his hand, signaling quiet. "Inside," he said. The fortress interior was dark, lit only by the pale glow of emergency lamps buried in the stone. Hallways stretched like veins through the rubble, each echo carrying the memory of war. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the silence grew, as though the walls themselves mourned. Then, at the heart of the hall, they found him. Kaeldar lay propped against a throne of broken marble, a giant even in ruin. His mane, once gold and proud, was matted with blood. Shattered plates of armor clung to his chest, and his breathing rasped through the chamber like a dying storm. At the sound of boots, his eyes opened. Golden irises flared with dim fire, narrowing as he reached for a broken blade at his side. You dare, he growled, voice a low thunder, to mock the last breath of a king? Elias stepped forward slowly, lowering his weapon. He kept his voice even. We came to carry you out. Kael'thar's laugh was bitter, choked by blood. No allies remain. They chose the sky, not the ground. Why would humans stay, when even my own council abandoned me? Because we don't run from those who fought for us, Elias said simply. The king studied him, disbelief shadowing his gaze. He had seen treachery, cowardice, the pragmatism of politics. This was something different. Behind Elias, medics rushed forward, scanners humming, field kits snapping open. They pressed coagulant foam to wounds, injected stabilizers into thick veins. Kael'thar bared his fangs but did not resist. You waste your lives, he rumbled. A king dying in battle is honor enough. Maybe for you, Elias said. For us, leaving someone behind isn't honor, it's shame. And I won't wear it. The words hung heavy in the air. The king's great chest rose and fell, each breath a war between pride and disbelief. Finally, he whispered, Strange creatures. Strange, but fierce. Hold still, one medic said. We'll keep you breathing. From the calm, Kane's voice cut in. Sir, enemy movements, closing fast. Dozens, maybe more. Elias turned, eyes narrowing. Time's gone. Get him on the sled. The Marines snapped into motion, sliding the grav sled into position. With careful effort, they lifted the massive body of the king, his frame dwarfing them, his mane trailing over armored shoulders. As the sled hummed to life, Kael'thar's eyes caught Elias once more. You risk your kind standing, he said, voice rough but steady. The council will curse you for this. Then let them, Elias answered. They've cursed us before. The first shot cracked against the stone as Drogketh forces surged into the hall. Shadows flickered against the walls, green bolts streaking past. Move! Elias roared. The Marines surged forward, sled hovering between them. Kael'thar's eyes burned faintly as he clutched the remnants of his broken blade. If I must fall, I will fall fighting. Not today, Elias shot back. Gunfire roared in the corridors, echoing like thunder through the ruin. Marines fell back in disciplined bursts, rifles blazing, grenades shredding choke points. The grav sled glided over cracked stone, medics shielding it with their bodies. Bolts scorched Elias's armor as he fired point-blank into a Drogketh charging from the dark, the creature collapsing in a hiss of smoke. He didn't slow, didn't falter. Every step forward felt stolen, wrestled from the jaws of enemies who wanted nothing more than to watch the king die. Yet the humans pushed on, one breath, one trigger pull at a time. They burst into the courtyard once more. Ash clouds churned as more Drogketh poured from the rubble. Rivera's voice shouted from the calm. Shuttle inbound. 30 seconds. 30 seconds felt like eternity. Marines formed a ring, rifles blazing, bodies straining against the weight of numbers. The grav sled hovered at the center, the king towering even in collapse. His golden eyes burned with something new, not resignation, but astonishment. You fight like dying men, he muttered, voice thick. We fight like men who don't quit, Elias said. Engines screamed overhead as the shuttle descended, dust exploding outward. The ramp dropped, Marines hauling the sled aboard while gunfire rattled like hail on steel. Go, go, go! Elias was the last up the ramp, turning to fire a final burst before the hatch sealed. The shuttle blasted skyward, leaving the Drogketh raging in the storm below. Inside, silence fell but for the rasp of the warrior king's breathing. Medics worked frantically, stabilizing readings, securing him for the trip back to the Resolute. Kael'thar turned his head toward Elias. Why? He asked, voice cracked but unyielding. Why bleed for me, when all others fled? Elias sat heavily across from him, armor scorched, face grim. Because someone had to. Because you fought when it wasn't your war. Because leaving you here would mean we're no better than them. The king's eyes closed slowly, as though he savored the words more than the medicine coursing through his veins. Then perhaps, humanity is not as young as they claim. The shuttle's engines carried them upward, away from fire and ruin, toward the waiting orbit. Yet for Elias, the fight had only begun. The shuttle pierced HFY's storms, engines screaming against turbulence. When it broke free of the atmosphere, the blackness of space opened like a vast cathedral. Wreckage from shattered fleets drifted across orbit, glowing faintly with plasma fires. The Resolute loomed ahead, battered but ready, her landing bay doors opening like the arms of a waiting fortress. Inside, Marines lowered the grav sled with King Kael'dar's immense body onto the deck. Medics swarmed him again, attaching monitors sealing wounds. He still bled, but his chest rose more evenly now. Elias pulled off his helmet, sweat streaking his scarred face. Around him, the soldiers looked exhausted, armor charred, but no one collapsed. Not yet. Rivera's voice broke the silence. Council channels are lighting up. They know what we did. Elias gave a humorless grin. Let them rage. It didn't take long. The main screen flared with dozens of transmissions. Alien envoys appeared in overlapping holos, their faces twisted with outrage. Human vessel, you defied the council vote. You risked destabilizing the entire front for sentiment. Veiltor's scaled visage appeared largest of all. His eyes narrowed like blades. Turn the king over to Drogketh custody. Immediately. Elias stood firm. You mean execute him before he can speak? No. He stays with us. The strategos leaned forward, his sharp. You endanger your species. Compassion is weakness, and weakness spreads. Humanity has shown its true nature, reckless, unfit for alliance. Before Elias could respond, another voice cut through the calms. Unfit? Kael'dar's growl rolled from the medbay. His form was still strapped to the sled, but his voice carried like thunder. Golden eyes glowed beneath heavy lids. Unfit, the king repeated, are those who abandon me. Unfit are those who speak of honor, yet scatter like dust at the first gale. When I called, only humans came. Remember that, strategos. Shock rippled through the feeds. Some envoys looked down, ashamed. Others whispered to aides. Elias didn't smile. He simply said, You heard him. He's alive, and he knows who stood by him. Veiltor's image flickered with fury before the line went dark. The Resolute turned from HFY, engines firing as it rejoined safer lanes of space. For the first time in hours, quiet fell on the crew. Elias walked the medbay, passing rows of bunks where Marines lay wrapped in bandages. Many would never rise again. He paused beside Sergeant Kane's empty berth, helmet placed neatly at the head. The cost of loyalty lay heavy. Kaeldar watched him from the sled, his breathing steadier now. His mane, though torn, seemed to blaze with a faint golden sheen under the ship's lights. You carried me from the fire, the king said, his voice softer but no less commanding. Why? Elias leaned against the railing. Because leaving you would have made us what the council thinks we are, weak. We'd rather bleed than be remembered as cowards. Kaeldar studied him with something like wonder. Among my people, honor is measured in battle scars. Perhaps among yours, it is measured in loyalty. Maybe both, Elias said quietly. The king's gaze sharpened. Then hear this, the Ardanthi will not forget. From this day, your people have a place in our halls. Your loyalty has bound us tighter than treaties ever could. The words struck deeper than Elias expected. He nodded once, unable to say more. Days later, the council convened again. The chamber brimmed with tension as delegates argued, voices clashing in the vaulted hall. Veiltor pressed charges against humanity, calling for sanctions, even expulsion. Then the doors opened. Every head turned as Kaeldar entered, towering, scarred, armor reforged but bearing the marks of his ordeal. The warrior king walked slowly yet with unshaken dignity, flanked by human guards. His very presence silenced the room. He stood at the center, gaze sweeping across every species present. You left me to die, he said, voice echoing through the chamber. You measured lives against resources and found mine unworthy. But one people did not. When even my own turned away, humanity did not. Whispers rippled, shame heavy in the air. Kaeldar raised his hand. Strength is not cruelty. Strength is not calculation. Strength is loyalty, honor, and the will to stand when all others run. Humanity showed me that. I name them not reckless, but true. Any who call them weak, let them face me. None spoke. Elias stood at the back, arms folded, watching the chambers shift. For the first time, humanity was not mocked as naive. They were feared, respected, even admired. Later, aboard the Resolute, the crew gathered in the memorial bay. Names of the fallen gleamed across steel plates, each letter carved by hand. Marines stood in silence, helmets held at their sides. Elias traced one name with his fingers, his brother's, lost years ago to another council retreat. Then his gaze dropped to the new names added after Kaeler v. Kane. 2 medics. 12 Marines. Each carved in steel, each paid in blood. Rivera stood beside him. They'll tell stories about this, you know. About us. Elias shook his head. They'll tell stories about the king. We're just the ones who carried him out. Rivera gave a faint smile. And sometimes carrying is the hardest part. The ceremony ended quietly. Soldiers filed out, leaving Elias alone with the wall. He laid a hand against the cold metal. This time, he whispered, voice breaking, we didn't leave him behind. Outside the viewport, stars stretched infinite, unblinking witnesses to what had been done. The galaxy was vast, cruel, and filled with betrayal, but for one moment, humanity had carved its truth into the fabric of history. Compassion was not weakness, it was the fiercest strength of all.